Bună ziua, doamnelor și domnilor! Bine ați venit la declarațiile comune de presă.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the press statements of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Romania and Ukraine. Minister Aurescu, you have the floor. Thank you. Welcome to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Dear Minister, dear Dmytro, welcome to Bucharest. Welcome to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs again. I am very happy that we had the opportunity to see each other again and to discuss in person during these extremely complicated times. And I would like to congratulate you from the heart for your exceptional activity in the benefit of Ukraine and of our shared values. Today we had a very substantial dialogue that we will continue after this press conference, an exchange of opinions that was very applied about the serious security and humanitarian situation in Ukraine generated by Russia's illegal, unjustified and premeditated aggression on Ukraine. I reiterated Romania's firm support for the independence and sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, as well as for the heroic efforts of the Ukrainian authorities, of the Ukrainian citizens to fight back the Russian aggression, which is a blatant violation of all the international obligations of Russia. Romania or Ukraine or the international community cannot accept the violation of the order based on rules, which would mean to impose the arbitrary by force. I take this opportunity to express condolences and my deep regret for the losses of human lives, for the so many human lives that were ended during this illegal aggression, for the massive material destructions in Ukraine, which negatively impact the life of Ukrainian citizens. The human dramas, the horrors and the sufferings of the Ukrainian people have grieved us together with the entire world. We are standing by the Ukrainian people. Dear Dmytro, those that died in Ukraine are our brothers and sisters, our parents and children. This is why the atrocities and the war crimes and the crimes against humanity and the genocide crime cannot remain unpunished. And Romania is actively supporting the efforts of the international community to investigate this violation of international law, of the human rights and of the humanitarian international law. As you know, the Romanian government has granted a financial contribution to the International Criminal Court to support the investigation in Ukraine. Also, we reacted promptly and substantially from the beginning of the Russian invasion through various measures in order to offer shelter and assistance to the Ukrainian refugees, for which the Russian aggression has dramatic effect. Until now, we had more than 100,000 refugees into our country, and the assistance for these people and those that remained in Romania was in the amount of more than 61 million euro, consisting in free access to medical services, education. More than 1,600 children are already enrolled in the Romanian educational system. The students are welcomed in the universities in Romania. Also, we supported the children in special situations. We provided free transportation in Romania. We opened the labor market. More than 2,000 Ukrainian citizens are already hired in Romania since the beginning of the invasion. I would like to ensure you, Minister, dear Dmytro, that all the Ukrainian refugees in Romania are and will be treated properly, will have the chance to continue a normal life until the situation will enable them to go back safely to Ukraine. I have to mention and commend once again the extraordinary solidarity and hospitality of the Romanian citizens who have supported from the first moments of the conflict the refugees that came to Romania and also those that remain in Ukraine. The governmental platform that was created for this shows more than 9,000 support initiatives from the civil society. Also, we sent several transports of humanitarian aid, fuel, medicine, and food. And I recall here the package on the 28th of February, 3.5 million euro, 16th of March, 2.3 million euro, and 11 ambulances this week. Also, the Suceava regional hub that was commissioned on the 9th of March ensures a constant delivery of international support for Ukraine, being transited until now by more than 31 transport, that is 162 trucks from various European countries, Italy, France, Bulgaria, Austria, Slovenia, Cyprus, Romania, and other countries. Ukraine has to win this war, and I'm convinced that they will do so. Then we will have the reconstruction after the conflict will end. During this reconstruction, that will take a while, the international community will have to grant support, and I can assure my colleague that Romania is ready to be part of this sustained effort. I also want to take the opportunity to commend Ukraine for sending the response for the first part of the questionnaire for the accession to the EU, and I want to repeat the strong support of Romania for the European aspirations of Ukraine and for the recognition of the European perspective of the state that is a friend and a neighbor. I also supported at the European level, in terms of the meetings of the head of states and governments and ministerial of foreign ministers, that EU should show vision and courage in order to give Ukraine and Moldova and Georgia the sign that they expect, namely that they are entitled to be full members of the EU. I am so happy to salute the fact that Moldova sent today the response to the first part of the questionnaire for the accession. At the same time, we know from our own experience that the road to accession is a complicated one that implies many efforts and reforms, and we will continue to actively support, to the extent that it is necessary, to support Ukraine in this entire process that is a complex and diligent one. We've also talked about reopening the Romanian embassy in Kyiv. I informed the minister about our decision. When we took this decision, 8 missions of the EU member states were already open in Kiev, and I hope that the preparations will be finalized as soon as possible and we can resume our activity in Kiev. We also talked about increasing physical connectivity between our states. We talked about opening new cross-border points because we need more connectivity between us in order to facilitate people movement, the movement of goods. And from this point of view, the way in which Isakcha border crossing point, the importance or the role that it has played in this war. We also took measures regarding facilitating Ukrainian trade with other states, that is the temporary liberalization of the transport. And this decision was made on the 5th of April. We talked about energy security matters, and I'm happy to salute the connection of Ukraine to the European electricity grid on the 16th of March. We also talked about the fact that the strong ties between our countries are given also but our related minorities. I outlined the remarkable behavior of the Romanians in Ukraine, which support the common effort of the Ukrainian state. We will continue to deal with the issues of the Romanian and Ukrainian communities in our countries, and I'm convinced we can solve all their problems. I will stop here by expressing once again my strong belief that through a common effort we can take our bilateral relations to a new level and to build in this part of Europe a model of cooperation. And I know from our close relationship that we have built in the recent years that these are not just perspectives but certainties when it comes to this. And this very complex period with the war, with an aggression and human suffering only made our societies come even closer and our citizens. Dear Dmytro, you have the floor.
Thank you, Bogdan. I really appreciate that you agreed to receive me on the eve of Easter, as your Prime Minister and your Minister of Defense did. This is yet another example of the real, sincere friendship that we have between Ukraine and Romania. When it comes to the substance, you almost stole almost all of my speaking points. I can only subscribe to what Bogdan just said on all accounts. Let me say just a couple of points in addition to that. Every time President Putin tries to stop Ukraine in its development, in its European integration, the only result that he achieves is the speeding up of these processes. To my and our deepest regret, every such attempt by Putin comes at a price for Ukraine. But what is happening now is not only another attempt of Russia to maintain its influence in this part of Europe, in the Black Sea region, not only the attempt to stop Ukraine, it's also the final battle for the right of all European nations. And it's not only about Ukraine, it's also about Georgia, about Moldova, about all countries in the Black Sea region. It's our common final battle for the opportunity to live in peace, in prosperity, as part of a whole and free Europe. And I have no doubts, and I appreciate that Bogdan doesn't have any doubts either. I have no doubts that we will win this battle. Ukraine will prevail. And there are two components which are necessary for us to prevail. The first one is the Ukrainian stamina and courage. And the second one is friends. Friends who stand by Ukraine in practical terms, who support providing Ukraine with all necessary equipment, who support more sanctions against Russia, who embrace Ukrainian refugees, giving the chance for husbands, fathers, and brothers to fight against Russia, knowing that their mothers, sisters, and children are in safety and taken care of. As long as these two ingredients are in place, the victory is getting closer and closer. And I would like to commend the government of Romania for shaping a very smart policy since the beginning of aggression to stand by Ukraine. We all share the Black Sea. And this war, as I said, it's also about the future of the Black Sea region. Our security is your security. You are helping us, you are also helping yourself. The fair deal that Ukraine offers to the world is simple. You give us everything that we need to fight and to win, and we, in return, contain Putin in Ukraine and defeat him there. So that he doesn't dare to test Article 5 of NATO and doesn't try to expand further his aggression. Those in Europe who believe that this is just Ukraine-Russia war and Putin will never dare to test Article 5 shouldn't be naive. We in Central Europe and Central and Eastern Europe are not naive. We know history. But others should be aware of a very simple fact. The best way to stop Putin is to give Ukraine everything it needs. During the war, the divisions are all gone. In Ukraine, ethnic Ukrainians, ethnic Romanians, ethnic Hungarians, ethnic Belarusians, ethnic Georgians, Moldovans, Russians, they all fight for Ukraine. Some of them regretfully die in the war, in combat. But they understand what they are fighting for. They are fighting for not only for Ukraine, but for their own motherlands, for their countries, so that they do not know the tragedy of war. And we respect highly every sacrifice on the battleground. And the Romanian community in Ukraine, while being an inseparable part of a broader Romanian culture, they also fight for their motherland, for Ukraine. And this is another element that brings us even closer, us, Ukraine and Romania. Now, unspeakable crimes were committed by the Russian army in Ukraine. But unfortunately, this is only the tip of the iceberg of all the crimes committed, especially in Mariupol. Romania and Bogdan personally have vast experience in international adjudication, in the prosecution of international crimes at international level. So yes, we discussed how we can use the ICJ, International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, to bring Russia to account for everything it has done. And we will we will be happy to learn, to work with Romania on this. I would like once again to thank the Romanian government for embracing Ukrainian refugees. These people could have been victims of the Russian war crimes. And the fact that you allowed them to come to the country saved lives to many of them. Now, I will not be, it would be unfair for me not to mention that, of course, I want all of my compatriots to go back to Ukraine and to live a new life and to rebuild the country. And hopefully, together, we will bring the moment closer to when this will be possible. But let's be objective. Some of them will stay in Romania and will start a new life here. I would like to assure you that they will be very committed new members of your society, and the Ukrainian community will further enrich Romanian society and will be another joint between our governments. Thank you for the readiness of Romania to participate in the post-war reconstruction of Ukraine. We are already thinking about it. We are already building plans. We already have a picture of the new Ukraine that will be built. And this new Ukraine will be a European Ukraine, and the support of Romania in providing Ukraine with candidate status at the nearest opportunity in the end of June is very much appreciated. This will be Ukraine that will remain a happy home, a home for many, all ethnicities and nationalities. And this will be Ukraine that will, together with friends and partners like Romania and other countries, ensure safety and security of the entire Black Sea region. The final words that I want to use are the following. Please have no doubts. We will prevail. But to make this happen rather sooner than later, we need to continue working on all fronts, on every issue, in the fastest way possible, to make sure that Ukraine receives everything that it needs, to make sure that all necessary sanctions are imposed on Russia, to make sure that Russia is isolated everywhere in the world. We cannot stop, neither us, nor you, nor anyone else can stop until we all defeat this evil. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Putem să luăm câteva întrebări din partea presei. O să luăm două întrebări pentru domnul ministru Aurescu, două întrebări pentru domnul ministru Kuleba. Începem cu doamna Carmen Gavrila, Radio România.
Bună ziua, Mr. Kuleba. I'm from the public broadcaster. Mr. Aurescu, if in the June Council there will be the discussion about the candidate state for Ukraine, how will Romania act? And Mr. Kuleba, what will be different after the war in the relationship between Romania and Ukraine in questions like Krivo Europe and other issues that didn't sit very well between the two countries until now? Yes, thank you for your question. As I've said, Romania firmly supports the European perspective of Ukraine. So, the quickest the accession process, the better it will be. And Romania will support these steps as fast as possible for Ukraine and for Moldova and for Georgia to become a part of the big European family. So, we hope that this phase, that is the filling in of the questionnaire, the first part of the questionnaire was filled in, now we have the second part which is more complex, much more questions than in the first part, which only had 300 and something questions. Then we have the opinion of the European Commission and this political discussion in the Council of the European Union, and of course, Romania will support this process and its finalization in favor of Ukraine and in favor of Moldova and Georgia.
Well, we shouldn't over-dramatize our relationship before the war. I cannot say that it was full of problems that have to be resolved or forgotten. But Bogdan and I did a lot to minimize the number of issues which exist between any countries, even the most friendly one. But of course, you know, war is a moment of truth. And everyone, literally everyone, shows his or her real face in times of war. And the real face that Romania showed is a face of a sincere friend who doesn't only talk the talk, but who also walks the walk and provides Ukraine with very specific support. And we will never forget it. We will never forget it, and after we celebrate our joint victory, I'm sure that both countries will sit down and approach different issues differently from both sides, in a way that will not undermine our national interests, neither Romanian nor Ukrainian. This is not what we're being paid for, to compromise national interests, but in a way that will allow to find all mutually acceptable solutions to all outstanding issues, and there are not too many of them.
And if I may add, yes, we have worked at least in the last 2.5 years, to solve many of the issues that were on our agenda, especially those that referred to the Romanian minority or the Romanian community in Ukraine. For example, we succeeded to agree that there is a perfect identity between the Romanian language and so-called the Moldovan language, which actually doesn't exist. We managed to resume the mechanism that is the joint commission on minority issues. We had progress in terms of education in Romanian language in Romanian. Of course, the war stopped us from finalizing some of these actions. We agreed to conclude a comprehensive agreement in preserving the identity of our communities in Romania and in Ukraine. And when things are going to be finalized in terms of the acute issues that Ukraine is facing now, we will continue these initiatives. So all these matters are on our bilateral agenda. We managed to facilitate more interhumane contact. Our actions before the war were on an ascending trend, and indeed, after the hostilities, and because the Ukrainian economy is very affected by the war, and earlier we are talking about the way in which it is impacted by this war, well, we need to help Ukraine rebuild itself, and economic cooperation with the neighboring states, including Romania, will be a very important thing. So resume also the economic joint commission between the two countries. So there were many things that we already agreed and that are still valid, only that we need to have some time to solve these issues when the more pressing issues regarding the fighting this illegal and unjustified and unprovoked aggression of Russia in Ukraine and against Ukraine will be solved. So, indeed, Romania, maybe it hasn't talked so much about what it has done, but indeed we have achieved a lot. Ana Maria Roman, Antena 3.
Way to stop Putin is to give Ukraine everything it needs. So I would like to ask if you have talked today with Prime Minister Nicolae Ciucă about what Ukraine needs regarding military technique, and if the Romanian government committed to provide Ukraine this kind of help. Și aceeași întrebare pentru domnul Aurescu. Știu că apărarea nu este domeniul dumneavoastră, domnule ministru, dar faceți parte din Guvernul României și reprezentați România. Ca atare aș vrea să vă întreb dacă se caută soluții în acest sens. Astăzi, președintele Camerei Deputaților a declarat că ar exista posibilitatea de a trimite aeronave Ucrainei.
Dacă permiteți, am să încep eu acest răspuns și colegul meu va continua.
And my colleague will continue. What I can assure you with all seriousness is that Romania, as an EU member state and as a NATO member state, is a very responsible state and very committed state to fulfilling its international obligations and also to supporting Ukraine in all fields. And we are committed to our partners, the strategic partners that are closer or further in geographical terms. As you know, the EU is supporting these actions. NATO and the member states support these initiatives. But as the Prime Minister and the President have said, things are continuously developing, and I don't think it's very good to talk a lot publicly about such matters. Thank you.
We have a very fair approach to all countries who are ready and willing to do something. We shared the same list of our needs among NATO members and among EU members. And we said, if every country decides to provide us with at least one position from the list, we will get what we need. So The government of Romania is well aware of this list. And yes, I raised this issue with the Prime Minister and with Minister of Defense and with Bogdan. And I appreciate their, I would say, constructive approach to it. But we leave it to the country to decide what it can do. Because it's your sovereign choice, it's your national interest that you take into account. In some cases, I have to be frank with you, we see that countries can do something, can provide us with a certain weapon, but don't do it because they do not want to come at odds with Russia. If we see that this is the case, we start increasing pressure, diplomatically, and if that doesn't help, publicly. But this is not the case for Romania, don't get me wrong, I'm just explaining to you our overall approach to all countries who, of the European Union and NATO. If the country gets back to us and says, guys, we do not have a tank, but we have bulletproof vests and we are ready to share them with you, we understand that. What we do not accept is hypocrisy. Fortunately, this has not been the case with Romania. Romania has been very honest, friendly, and open-minded and forthcoming since the beginning of the war.
Thank you. Iulian Ionescu, Ecopolitic.
Iulian Ionescu, Ecopolitic. Hello. A question for both ministers. In the context of the invitation you've made, including during the meeting with Prime Minister Ciucă and in the conference that is to substantially contribute to the reconstruction of Ukraine, if you think or if you have discussed about building factories or relocating factories in Romania, of course, with the participation of the Ukrainian state and Romanian state, and how do you see a resuming of the Ukrainian exports, because you've mentioned facilitating Ukrainian exports. So what is Romania doing and what is Ukraine doing in this sense? Of course, we have discussed about these matters, but we didn't go into details. We will have the opportunity to continue the discussions after this press conference. What is very important is the fact that Romania wants to be very active and substantially involved in the efforts to rebuild Ukraine. The fact that we are a close neighbor of Ukraine is an advantage in this sense, which should be used, and for sure we will capitalize on it. And as for the details, of course, they will be discussed by the experts who can propose solutions to facilitate the participation in the reconstruction of Ukraine. Funds will be needed, but also in-kind contribution will be needed, and of course expertise. Based on the concrete requests of Ukraine, we can adjust our efforts in this process. As for the Ukrainian exports, I have just presented that measure to facilitate the transport for the Ukrainian transporters in Romania. As you know, we are working on increasing the capacity of the Constanța harbor to take over some of the transit of merchandise from Ukraine to other countries that cannot be done now due to the blockade imposed by the Russian forces. And of course, we are open to examine any other means to help Ukraine continue to export if they have goods that need to be exported, especially when it comes to grains, which are on high demand at the moment on the global market.
You know, no one is really talking about it yet, but the truth is that we are about to see a rebirth of the Danube River. Now that Ukrainian ports are blocked by Russian mines and we cannot export through them, we actively elaborate together with our immediate neighbors and the European Commission alternative routes. And there have been many. Of course, the port of Constanța is one of them, and by the way, we appreciate the way they handle Ukrainian cargoes. It's also beneficial for Romania. But I think that the real opportunity that lays in front of us and needs to be picked up from the ground is Danube. And I was in Bulgaria yesterday. I'm in Romania today, and in my meetings we discuss the potential of Danube and what needs to be done to take maximum out of the potential opportunities it provides. So yes, we will be building alternative routes by land, by sea, but this is the real big chance for Danube River to become the even more economically profitable, important, and to better connect Black Sea region countries with Western European countries in terms of trade. So we will be attaching great importance to developing Danube infrastructure and trade routes through the river. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. We'll take one last question. Laura Ștefănescu, National Television.
For Mr. Kuleba, please. Ukraine has received any military equipment or any military assistance from Romania, please. Și pentru domnul ministru Aurescu, înțeleg că trebuie să...
Mr. Aurescu, I understand we have to talk in silence about these sort of elements, but I would like to ask you if the Romanian government has made a decision to deliver or to donate military equipment or heavy equipment, tanks, and when are you going to make explicitly this decision and to make it publicly? Thank you for your question. I've just answered this a little earlier.
Yes, what I will answer now is applicable to all countries we work with. It's not only about Romania, it's about everyone. And the answer is this: weapons, like money, love silence. And we do not comment on what we get, where from we get it, unless there is kind of an official public announcement about it. But again, I would like to reiterate that the policy taken by Romania since 24th of February is a smart one. And I will leave everything else to your interpretations.
Thank you, Minister.